All right, let's give it a go. Okay, so a couple of things, just a couple of like cleanup things. So we're on lesson 4 today. I have moved all of our code to GitHub. So now if you do miss class and you need the code for whatever reason, there's a link under resources. It says right up here, GitHub for lesson examples. I mean, I know most of you don't have a GitHub account, but you can publicly view this, so you don't need a GitHub account. You do? Cool, so you guys know how to do Git? Cool. We're going to talk about it too next week. Yeah. Hopefully you'll know how to Git by the time we're done next week. Anyways, maybe we'll even take a look at actually pulling a resource down. We can actually look at cloning that. But anyways, all the lessons are there. The example files are there. And you'll notice this one new little one called projects. Yeah, project part 1 is getting issued tonight. It's big, no word of a lie. But, I mean, you get to work in groups of 3. So that should make it at least a little easier. Whoever designed these running shoes was a fucking moron. The laces are like this long, but there's no way to like lower the amount of laces. Sorry, ADHD moment. Yeah, so that's the lessons. If you need them, they're on under resources. Also, incidentally, under there is the Slack invite link, our course lesson plans for the actual courses themselves, and the syllabus plus information about me. Not sure if we ever actually looked at this folder in week 1. There's stuff there. Good stuff you want. All right, so we're under lesson 4. The quiz is open. The password is CRUD. You are welcome to take that at any point of your choosing, as long as it's done before midnight. However, I'm not going to halt class to do the quiz because it takes up too much time. We'll talk about the project after we do a little bit of the class, and there will be a lab tonight as well. It is not creating and reading data. That is incorrect. Looks like I need to post the lab. Because I appear to have posted the wrong one. But I'll do that before the class. I'll do that on the first break. I'll post the lab, and then you guys can do the lab after class or during class or whatever you so choose. Alrighty. Where were we last week? Last week, we did things. What things did we do? We did some CRUD stuff, but I think we only did the C and R of CRUD, right? Just create and read. So this week, we are going to do more CRUD things, but this time we're going to do update and delete. Let's take a look at the lesson plan for this week. That is not the lesson plan for this week. That is for last week. Updating and deleting data. That's what we're going to talk about. And a lot of this is going to feel like a recap, because what you're going to start to notice is as we go through the CRUD operations and create our files and everything, a lot of it is the same strategy to solve a problem, right? Like reading data is always done the same way. Creating data is always done the same way. Interacting with MySQL is generally done the same way. All these strategies are just going to be duplicates of each other, which is good because it makes understanding it, remembering it, working with it a little easier when you start to notice that pattern. So pay close attention to the fact that a lot of the stuff we're doing is just a repeat of stuff we've already done, okay? Cool. All right, so let's talk about adding actions to our table. So today we want to create the ability, so last week we created the ability to create a row, right? So we could create a new row in our countries table. We also made the way for us to be able to read that data. Well, in addition to being able to create a new row, we also want to give people the ability to update that row. Maybe the country's population changes, which I mean, they change all the time, right? So obviously you're going to need some way to change that data at a later point. So in order to do that, we're going to need to be able to update it. However, usually when you see an application, you see like the navigation for that application. The navigation will have like a link to home, and it'll have a link to like countries to create a new one or view all the countries. But you won't necessarily have a link to update a country. And the reason for that is that your country database could wind up with 96 countries in it, and those 96 countries, you don't want 96 links in your nav pointing to each individual country. There are much better ways to do this, right? And one of them is in the table where we display all the countries, we actually create dynamic links to those countries, like a way for us to get from the row to an edit form or an ability to delete that particular row, because it will be unique to the row itself, right? So that's super important. Obviously, in order for us to build those links, we need to understand query strings, right? And query strings we talked a little bit about in past lessons. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see my fancy Illustrator graphic here. So this is a query string. You've seen this before, right? You saw this in lesson 2. So the first part is the domain, right? So the domain is like google.com, scm.education, whatever that is, that's your domain, right? The preceding question mark basically tells the browser that the following line is a query string, right? So if you were, for example, to go to Google, right? I'll type my usual internet check. Boom, internet's working. If you look at the URL that is up there, ooh, it's changed. They've modified it. Interesting. So now, instead of the Q that used to be there, you'll see the question mark, which signifies that the rest of the URL string, the URI, they call it, the rest of the URI is a query string. And the first variable or parameter that shows up in there is SXSRF, and it has a value that I'm definitely not writing out because I'm super lazy, but it has a big long value. Then there's another parameter further along called source. Oh, I hate doing these. There we go. Good enough. Source, and it is equal to something else as well. This will become a key inside our associative array $_get, right, the super global, and this will become its value, and then this will become a key and its value inside that array as well. And we looked at that when we created the array. I did basically this, where the name was Sean, the age was 41, and Mary was true, and that showed up inside the associative array as keys and values, and we looked at that in the $_get. We need to use this in order to create a dynamic URL pointing to an edit page, but providing the edit page a parameter and a value so we can go grab a specific record from our database. Because whenever we edit, we only want to edit the specific row we've chosen to edit. We don't want to accidentally edit all the rows or another row that's not the row we're on. We want to make sure we get the correct row. So we're going to use a query string in order to make that happen. So, incidentally, the query string, these little graphics, I hope they help. The query string, when PHP gets a hold of that query string, it creates the get super global, right? And the super global from that query string will be parsed into this set of key value pairs, right? And it should make sense. Name, age, right? Sean McKinnon, right? It all matches up 1-to-1. All right. So we're going to create some dynamic edit and delete links. And they basically look like this. We're going to use relative URLs, so /. What the // actually stands for, it looks like this. /. It basically means start in the directory that this file is currently located in and look within this directory. That's basically what it means. So we're going to create these nice URLs. Let me just open up today's lesson. There we go. I'll put my notes over here. Great. So we're going to open up WAMP, obviously, so that we can create some code. Click yes. Hopefully, since last week, something hasn't screwed up your WAMP installations. We'll know if you have a little green W. If not, see me at the break and I will help you correct your orange W. Or red W. Hopefully you don't have a red W. All right. So this is going to be kind of a continuation from what we did last week. So what I would like you to do is click on the W and choose the www directory. So it opens up in your Finder. If you're on a Mac, you'll have to navigate to your htdocs under the applications folder, right? Navigate to that comp1006 directory and open it up. And then click once on the lesson 3 folder. We're going to duplicate this folder, which is really just a matter of hitting Control-C to copy it into your clipboard, Command-C if you're on a Mac. Actually, I think on a Mac, you can hit Command-D, and it will auto-duplicate the folder for you. You guys don't have that functionality in Windows. And then Control-V to paste it. Command-V if you're on a Mac and you have to paste it, you don't do the Command-D operation. So we'll say lesson 3 copy. We don't want lesson 3 copy. We want to convert this to lesson 4. So you can right click and choose to rename, or click once, wait like a second, and then click again, and that will also allow you to do that. Lesson 4. There we go. The reason why we're duplicating our files is because by the time we're done tonight, we'll have a complete application with the ability to create a new country, the ability to look at all the countries, the ability to update those countries, and the ability to delete those countries. This will serve as a foundation to your project part 1. So congratulations, you're here tonight, and you'll have a full operational app. Good, whatever, you know what I'm trying to say. All right, right click on lesson 4, open with code. And if you open examples, you'll see that we just have our 3 files that we created from last week. We have the form, we have an insert, and we have our table. So we're going to start with table, and we're going to actually add some links to table. So go ahead, double click on table to open it up in the editor. There we go. I'll zoom in a little. And I'm going to collapse my sidebar so that you can actually see what I'm doing. All right, so this file, fairly simple. We connected to MySQL, right? Connected to our lesson 3 database. We did a query where we pass our connection to the query and then run this SQL against our database. And that gets sent off to MySQL, and MySQL returns back a result object that we can now work with. We didn't want the result object. We wanted actually the rows, all the rows in our database, and we wanted them as an array of associative arrays. The associative arrays, you'll remember, is basically each of our rows with the columns as the keys and the values as the values, right? So we have to run these 2 lines in order to create that result. Now we have this rows variable filled with an array of associative arrays representing our rows in our database. Then, scroll down a little bit. We created our HTML table with our column headings. And then we have this short little PHP block. The PHP block has a for each loop in it. For each loop, iterates over the array. And as it iterates over the array, it takes each item from the array and passes it into this, I like to call them throwaway variables, because it literally lives for the life cycle of the loop, and then that's it, it's done, right? We don't use it after that. So basically what happens is as it iterates through rows, it's going to take each item from the array, which will be a row, right? It's going to pass it and store it into the row variable, and then pass it into these curly braces, which is known as a block. So it passes it into the block. Now we have that available to us within the block, and you can see we're utilizing that. We first echo out a new row, right? Just regular HTML, that's all we're doing, echoing out HTML. Then we echo out these TD tags. And TD tags stand for a cell, right? So when you look at a table, it's in columns and rows. So an intersection of that is a cell, right? Just like in Excel. Then, using string interpolation, represented by these double quotes, we output the row name, which is just one of the columns, right? And then row description, and row population, which is really just the value that's stored at that associated. So hopefully associated arrays are starting to become, I don't know, more secondhand. You're starting to get used to them. Maybe you're starting to hate other languages because they don't have it, that kind of stuff. But hopefully they're starting to feel comfortable and familiar. And we use them so much, and we're going to continue to use them so much that they should become second nature. All right, so we're going to add a couple of more pieces in here. One, we're going to add another column, and we're going to call that column actions. So first, we're going to give it a name. So we'll come up here where we have our TH tags on line 26. I'm going to hit enter and create a new TH tag. And I'm going to call it actions. And that's where we're going to store our two links, edit and delete. But like I said, each link needs to be unique. It has to be unique because when we click edit, the row that loads up inside our form has to be the row that we clicked on. It can't be the row above or below or all the rows. That wouldn't make sense. We need to finite it down to just that specific row. Scroll down a little bit. We're now going to add the actual actions themselves. And we're going to do this in 4 lines. So the first line is just going to be the opening TD tag. Like so. We're going to echo the opening TD tag. Then I'm going to create a space between it and the other one. I'm going to echo out a closing TD tag so I don't forget. So I have an opening TD tag and a closing TD tag. And once again, this just creates a cell in our table, in the HTML table. Now I want to add some links. And like I said, I'm going to do these as 2 separate pieces. So the first one, I'm going to click echo or type echo. I'm going to create an A with a href. Use single quotes for the href in here. And a closing A. The reason why we're using single is because if we use double, this would get treated as a string, this would get treated as a string, and the PHP parser would explode because it wouldn't know what you're trying to do with these 2 strings, one right after the other. Wouldn't have a clue. So we have to use single quotes if we want to quote anything inside. We're going to call this edit. So put the word edit between them. That's just the name we're giving it. You can give it whatever name you want. You can even bring in like an icon library and load in an icon. And then we're going to create the actual URL. So the first part of the URL will just be a part of the string, just normal, right? So first we're going to use relative location. So we're starting in the directory that this file is currently located in. And really we want to go to edit.php. That's where we want the link to go. Makes sense? Where's edit? Might as well go to edit.php. Next we want to add our query string. To signify that we're doing a query string, we use a question mark. That says what follows is a query string. The query string, each set needs to have a key or like a label, like a name or parameter, has to have a key and a value. We need both those pieces separated by an equal sign. So the key we're going to use here, you can really use any key you want. I like to stick to the name of the column in the database that I'm actually going to use as a reference, which is called ID, just because that makes sense to me. I like to keep my naming conventions all the same all the way around the board. Makes it a lot less confusing later. So ID equals, and then the value. And this is where we're going to actually put some PHP in here. And that's because the value of this will be unique. Remember, this is looping over each row inside our database, right? And as it gets the row, we get a unique name, a unique description, and a unique population. So this link needs to correspond to that row, obviously, right? So we want to output the actual ID here. So we're going to write PHP and the closing PHP tag. So you're going to have an opening and closing PHP tag here. What will happen is when the parser goes through your page, through your script, it's going to hit this PHP tag, and it's going to parse it and return whatever is inside here. And then that just becomes a part of the string. You won't actually see the PHP portion in your browser as I showed you guys in week 1. So next we're gonna, how do we output anything? What's the output command? What's that? Nope. How do we put something on the screen? Echo. Yep. We're gonna echo. And then we want to echo this same type of variable that you see up here. And we're going to do that. Oh, I screwed this up. Nope. Really screwed this up. Back all that out. Go right back just to ID. Sorry. Last semester when I taught this, I taught it using shorthand methods. So everything we did was with shorthand methods. Really nice and clean to look at, very easy to work with. Super confusing for students just learning PHP. So I abandoned that, and then I just forgot. All right, so actually, because we're already in PHP, we just do the same thing we did here, the exact same thing. So it's just the double curly braces, $row, ID. That's it. That's all it is. Made it way more complicated than it needed to be. There you go. All right, I'm awake. We're good. I promise. Yeah. Yeah, we want to make it so that we can edit this particular row. So edit.php will actually contain our form, and then we'll pre-populate it with the row's values, and then edit those values and submit it. ID is actually inside our database table countries. We have a column called ID. And ID is our primary index, meaning it's unique, right? And that's super important because we want to edit, we want to have some way to reference the row uniquely, so we get the exact row we want, right? We could use country name as well and make those unique, which would make sense because no two countries have the same name, right? Or I don't think there is. But in the off chance that exactly name things like that where there's strings get a little sketchy. At least this we can guarantee is unique because every row we add will automatically increment a new ID. You always get a unique ID every time. So we also need to create a delete link as well, and the delete link looks exactly the same as the edit link. I'll type it out. You can copy and paste, or how do we duplicate a line? Does anybody remember? Close enough. Alt-Shift down. You were so close. Yep. But I'll type it out just so you can see how it's formatted. So A, href equals the braces there, /A. Also, I noticed, just looking at your computer, your A and your href are right against each other, and you're going to wind up with one. And then we're going to call this one delete, obviously. Everything else is basically the same. It's going to point to delete.php, question mark, ID equals, curly braces, $row, ID. And then just because edit and delete, echo does not immediately put something to the next line, it also doesn't create spaces between things. It doesn't care. So what we need to do is make sure that we have something to space them out. I just put in a pipe character with a space on each side. Pipe character you'll find above your enter key. Where your backslash, forward slash, backslash. Incidentally, I know some international keyboards don't support the back or the pipe character, or even if you have a British keyboard. If that's the case, it's your right Alt key and the tilde, which is under your escape, to get the pipe character. It's really bizarre. Found that out the other day when I was trying to type the pipe character on my Raspberry Pi. Wasn't working. All right, so we got all this out. Let's go see if it actually works. I mean, it's not going to work because we don't have the pages yet, but at least we can see if they're there. Go to localhost /comp1006. Should have a list of your current examples that you've been working on, right? Click on Lesson 4. Click on Examples. Click on Table. And if you did it correctly, you should have a list of edits and a list of deletes in our very pre-2000 website. Go back to your page. Scroll to the very top. Bar down rows, so uncomment that one. Let's see if we actually have it. Save it. Yeah, so just go to your form and create sections, and that should. Yeah, good. No, you have an error. Okay. So anytime you see this unexpected block, it means that the line above is missing something. So yes, you're missing a semicolon. Yeah, you have too many quotations. You have to run one of the quotations. Right. Now your semicolon. Perfect. Last. There you go. Rounds. MySQL Connect. Your get address is failed. That's likely because whatever address you're connected to isn't working. Do you have LAMP? Yep. So go to your editor. Oh, local. Refresh. Okay, so that's a little better. Then you have undefined index. Its description. Right there. Oh, yeah. DESCRIPTION. Yeah, you. Sorry, you have data, you said? Do you have more than one MySQL running? Go to that's what you want. Open up another SQL file. So, select start with and you don't have go to SQL. Select star. Select to school, but you're not learning. She's like not taking some of the first basic countries in lowercase. She's not taking the math. She's not going to co-op. She's an academic. No, she's teaching. Yeah. Civic promoted too. How could you fail? All right. If you hover over any of these links, down at the bottom, you'll get your status. That's what this is called in your browser. And it should show the URL to that link. And what you'll notice is your ID should say 1, right? As you go down through each of the edit or deletes, that ID should change its number from 2, 3, 4, 5, meaning that each one of these URLs is now unique. So if I go down to here, I get ID equals 6 because I'm on the 6th row. So obviously, I'm going to click one of these. Doesn't matter which one I click. And I'm going to get a not found. And what that means is that the page inside your application is missing, right? So try to go to edit.php, but the file doesn't exist. It's missing. So we need to create it. So let's go to our IDEs or our editors or whatever you want to call them. What did you call this? Your notepad. Go to Microsoft Word. And I'm joking, don't do that. Right click on examples and choose new file. And we're going to create a page called edit.php, which should seem obvious. So now we have an edit.php page, but we have nothing on it, right? So here's the good news. We don't have to rewrite the form. It's exactly the same form, right, that we're going to use on edit.php. We're just going to make some minor changes to make it actually show our row results. So go to your form, Control A, because we're humans, Control C, because we like to copy, jump over to edit.php, and Control V. So once again, Control A, that selects everything on your page. By the way, that works in every application known to man. Control C, which copies to your clipboard, which also works in every application known to man. Go to edit.php, and Control V, so everything lands on that. Or if you really want to right-click, copy, paste, go for it. And then you should have the little circle up at the top here. That little circle that you see, this thing, by the way, is your editor tab. That's what these are called, this little thing up at the top. If you see the little circle, it means you haven't saved, right? So again, Control S. Let's get using shortcuts, right? There's no reason to go to File, Save, right? When we can do Control S. And you'll know you did it correctly because the circle will turn to an X. Don't click the X because you'll close the tab. One other thing I want to show you that's kind of neat and handy. VS Code actually indexes all these files into a big index map. And it makes it so that you can quickly go through your application and find a file and open it. And the way we do that is hit Control P. This helper pops up. Start to type the name of the file, EDI. You'll notice that it's right up in the top of the list. Hit Enter, and it loads that file for you. I mean, not a big deal when there's 4 files, right? But my one Ruby app that I use at work has about, I think there's almost 2,000 files in it. So it becomes really handy when you're dealing with a large application. It can take a little while for it to index, though. Okay, cool. So this looks exactly the same as our form for obvious reasons. Let's change the title because right now it says new country. It doesn't really make sense, right? We'll call it edit country. That's our first thing. Our H1 also says new country, so let's change that to edit country. Do we have an H1? You don't? Go ahead and create one. I did this to Thursday's class. I don't like them better. I just did it. It just kind of happened. They were looking at me weird. So yeah, do header, H1, edit country, header, right? Let's put a heading on this page. I should try to be consistent between the two classes. At the minimum. Everything else should be the same. The form basically looks the same, I hope. Did you say no, it doesn't? Is it different? I don't think it's different. All right, so we have our header now, hopefully. Let's go check and see if this actually produces a form. So we're going to go to our browsers. We're going to refresh that page that we currently have not found on. And we should, providing you saved, we should see edit country with the country name, country description, country population sitting in the form. So let's talk about this a little bit. I'm a user and I want to edit a country, okay? But the only thing I want to actually edit is the population. I currently have a problem with this form. What problem do I have with this form? Exactly. I'd have to know all the other information still. I'd have to know what the country name was, which I mean wouldn't be that big of a deal. But I'd also have to know the description, which could be a very big deal, right? I might not have all that information to create the description again. And the population, maybe I kind of want to know what the starting population was, so I can add increment up or increment down based on the starting population. Either way, I really want these three fields to be pre-populated with the original values. So that's why we're actually passing that query string. That's the whole reason we're passing it, is because I need to be able to retrieve the results and then pre-populate these values. So this is going to look very similar to what we did in table. Let's create some PHP code at the top of our page. Step one, anytime I want to interact with the database, what do I have to do? Like, first thing I have to do, create a connection, right? Can't do anything to the database if I don't have a connection. So let's create a connection. $con equals MySQL, spelled correctly, I underscore connect. What's argument 1? That's right, it's the host. Might be localhost, might not be. Next week, we'll see why it's not. Next week, we'll be connecting to a remote database, which means it won't be localhost anymore. It'll be a different address. What's my next argument? Yep, the username, right? Which is, for me, root. Should likely be root for everybody. Again, next week, it won't be root. It'll be something else. Yep, so currently, most of us have no password. If you're working with Mac, you might have a password called root. Also, if you're working with Mac, it's likely not localhost. It's likely localhost :8889. Just so you have a heads up. My password is null. And what's the last thing? It's less than 3 because we're still working with the same database that we were last week. But yes, it's the database name. Once we publish this, the unfortunate thing with Heroku, which is what we're going to be using for publishing, is you get one database. You only get one database. You don't get more than one. That's because they give it to you for free. So they're kind of chintzy about that. So we'll always be connecting basically to the same database. We'll just have to get a little funky with our tables, that's all. Which shouldn't be a big deal. Actually, I might be wrong. It might be a new database for every app that you create, and you can have an unlimited number of apps. So I might be wrong. All right, we'll find out next week. We'll find out all together. All right, next I'm going to fetch, but this time instead of fetching all of the rows, I'm going to fetch one row, right? So fetch the single country by its provided ID. So $con. What's the command that I use to interact with the MySQL database? MySQLi underscore starts with a Q. Close to Curie. MySQLi, Madam Curie. Query. There we go. And you'll notice when you type it, it tells you the things that you need to use. The link that it says, use MySQLi link, that's really just our connection. So we just put in $con. That's what it's looking for. The next argument is a string, and the type of string is a SQL string that we're going to use. Instead of putting SQL in its own variable, we'll just type it inline. So we'll just add a couple of quotation marks, end this with a semicolon, and put our cursor in between these quotes. So here's what our query is going to look like, and it should seem very familiar. Select star from countries. Okay? Obviously, there's going to be more to this. If I select star from countries, how many countries am I getting back? One? All of them. Got every single one of them. What does the star mean? All what? All what? All them what? Rows? Is it all them rows? All of it. It's actually not all them rows. The star actually represents your columns. So with MySQL, the way it works, you select all columns from countries. The number of rows that get returned are based on whatever condition. It's always all of them. No matter what you do, it's always all of them unless you change the where clause, and then that will filter them down. But this is actually a representation of the columns in your database. So if I said select ID from countries, I'll only get back the ID column. I'll get back the ID column for every row, but I'll only get back the ID column. You can actually give a list of the columns, and it's actually a good idea that you restrict your queries to only return back what you need, not more than you need, right? So that is a point. I'm surprised you guys weren't told that. But yeah, the star does not represent all rows. It represents all columns. So select all columns from countries, and then we have the clause, right? The Santa Claus, where it was a terrible joke. I shouldn't have got you at all. Where ID, right? Because we want to filter it down by the ID. So where ID is equal to, and then haha, this is where our get super global gets to shine. Remember, our ID that we want to access, we already have. It came with the query parameter. When we click the edit link, we sent the query parameter to our destination. And in that destination, we now have a get super global with one key called ID with the value of whatever one of the rows you clicked. To access that, we'll add the curly braces, and then VS Code will stupidly shove the line to the end for some reason. I don't know why it does that. Was it your class that I yelled, hey Siri, hey Google, all that? No. Yeah. No? Must have been another one. So where ID equals, and then we just simply pass the associative array and reference the ID column. This is one of those times where the wrapper kind of actually messes this up a little bit. This is all one, though. The curly brace, from the opening curly brace to the closing curly brace, is all one statement. Just the wrapper is shoving it to the next line. The easiest way to tell that I have not hit the return key is notice the number 5, and then it goes to 6. It means that I didn't hit enter. This is just auto wrapping. Might seem obvious, but I find explaining it saves issues. So that's cool. So now we're selecting a singular row back. However, if we do the MySQL fetch all like we did with the table, it will actually still return an array with a single row in it, which is a bit redundant, right? Because we would still have to iterate over the array just to get access to the row, which is silly. We don't need to do that. The easier way to do that, because we only are accessing one row, or at least we're hoping we're only getting one row back, otherwise our database is broken. We're going to go row equals, and we're going to use MySQL I fetch association. And the cool thing about this function is it will return back the first row that it's working with. So whatever the first row is in this result set that we get back with this query. Why did I call this con? That was stupid of me. Change the name of that to result, not con. That was dumb. In other words, we'll overwrite our connection. So this will contain our result. So this will return back the first row inside this result. So if this result had 25 rows, you will only get one, the first one it encounters, which is fine because we only want one row. We don't need more than one row. So MySQL fetch association, and then just $result. So notice we don't need the MySQL I underscore association constant here because we've already told it we want it as an associative array. That's what this ASOC part means, actually, that we want to retrieve back the result as an associative array. Still 2 commands just to get back the row, but that's the best we can do right now. The best I can do. Var dump it. Dump the row. All right, so we can at least see if this is working. Var dump, super handy function to learn, especially when you're just fresh learning PHP. How are we doing for battery there, Lindsay? Oh, right, I was a part of that. I need to drink less, I think. Drinking at work is so much fun. So here's our row back, right? Notice it's not sitting in a nested array. We don't see array and then array. We just see one array. It's an associative array. We keep saying that. Associative array because instead of numerical values for our indices, instead of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we get ID, name, description, population, created at, updated at. So this is what we're currently returning. Okay? That's what that star means. Select star means all the columns. If you didn't want created at or updated at, you would say select ID, comma, name, comma, description, comma, population, and it would only return back those 4 columns for you. So we still haven't populated our database with this data, or not our database, sorry, our form. Let's go ahead and do that now. To pre-populate a value, and it's so interesting. You guys learned about placeholder, right? Placeholder is like a preview of what you should put there. However, if you submit a form with a placeholder, the value in the placeholder doesn't go anywhere. It's just a preview. It's just a hint. It's to help the user understand what they should put in the field. If you want to populate a value in there, you have to use the value attribute. So write value equals with a set of quotation marks. That's the value attribute on our form. Anything we type in here will now be visible inside the form field. So you can write in hello world, just so you can see how it works. Once you've done that, Alt-Tab over to your browser, Control-R to refresh, and you'll see that country name now says hello world. Undefined variable get, likely you're not doing $_get is why. Yeah, you need an underscore. Let's go back to our IDEs. Obviously, I don't want hello world. I want the row I just retrieved. So let's go ahead and output the value from the row. And we don't need to use a loop, right? Because it's not sitting inside an array. It's its own array. So we can just access it directly. So $row. Nope, need curly braces. Now we can type it. $row. And the value will be name. Like so. Not going to work. Why is it not going to work? What are we missing? Oh, I heard it. I heard it from somewhere. What are we missing? Yeah, we're missing the PHP tags. Watch. That's not correct. Did you say gross? Yeah, that's uber gross. So I'm going to show you 2 ways to do this. PHP echo, right? This is an inline tag. Nice, right? Super kind of handy, looks okay. Don't know why what you call it is freaking out, but it's freaking out. Oh, why are you freaking out? Oh, it's freaking out because of the curly braces. Get rid of the curly braces. That's why it's freaking out. Doesn't like those curly braces. The issue is that we are going to do this inline writing a lot, like so much. And the one thing I found when I started working with PHP was that I would type in PHP echo blah, and I was like, there's got to be a better way. This is stupid. So then I wound up writing a function for it called output. And then output would just, I would put my variable in output, and it would output it to the screen. But really under the hood, it was still just doing echo, right? Save myself 4 characters. Really, that was all. Wasn't really worth it either because I saved 4 to output 6, but whatever. There's a much better way. PHP, as of PHP 5, released a shorthand version of the echo statement. We're going to use the long version above here. And what I would like to do, just so we don't forget, is add a comment. Long version echo statement. Because I don't want you to get confused. The shorthand is the exact same thing, but it's very, very particular. Click on description, type in value equals quotations. Right? It's a regular value attribute. Here's the shorthand for it. It's less than question mark, equals. All three of those characters have to come right after each other. There can be no spaces between any of those three characters. Close off your PHP tag. These three characters, less than, question mark, equals, means echo. That's literally what it is. It's the opening PHP tag and the word echo. This is no different than writing all of them. Just instead of writing 7 characters, you're writing 3. Then you just put what you want it to echo out, which is row description. Use whichever one you feel comfortable with using. Okay? If you don't like this syntax because you find it difficult to understand, then use the echo one. Though I'm pretty sure most people grasp that pretty quickly. Now we can do the last one. Same deal. Value equals. Nice shorthand. Row. Population. This is going to word wrap. Let's scroll up a bit. There's quite a few shorthands that come in really handy. Like for example, where we're doing our table, there's a shorthand that allows us to do the table with, instead of outputting HTML using the echo tags, we can actually output HTML using HTML. And then we can just litter in our PHP values, which is the way we want to do it. But it is a little bit more, it's a bit more convoluted for some people, that's for sure. All right, once you've done that, Alt-Tab, and if you did it correctly, you should see your values in the form. So your form should show the 3 values. In my particular row, it was Switzerland, nice chocolate, and the population of 10 people. So the interesting thing about this is this kind of leads to a very common phrase in programming called nuke and pave. What nuke and pave generally means is that instead of actually paying attention to the values in the database and only updating the values in the database that changed, I pave over the entire record with the same values and changed values. You could go to the extent where you actually query the database, pull the record, compare the form values to the record, and figure out which ones have changed, and then write a nicely, update SQL command that only updates the values that change. Shoot me in the head. No way do I want to do that. Because it's just tedious and you're not saving anything. There's no efficiency to that. Because your extra call is already costing you. So there's no reason to do that. It's just better to nuke and pave. Right, so value won't work in text area. Instead, it's actually a little simpler. You do we'll just write TA for text area. You just literally blah, 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 and then closing TA. Does that make sense? So the value actually just goes in between the text area tags. Yeah. Select tags and checkboxes are a lot trickier when you need to pre-populate them. You have to basically check if there's a value, if that value is set, and then check off whatever that thing is. We will look at that in a future class when we start dealing with parent and children relationships. We'll do it then. But for now, we'll just suffice to text areas and input boxes. All right. Cool. I want to get rid of all the text above here, so I'm just gonna basically comment out the var dump, just so I can see my form. There's my nice form. I should be able to click the back button, back to my table, click on another one, so India vibrant with 1.3 billion people, and I should see the country population, the country description, the country name, and be able to make changes on that file if I so choose. All right? So Remember last week when I said we need to make sure we separate our actions, right? So the form should only do form things. So it should take user input, and that's all it should be responsible for. Anything that needs to happen to that user input, any processing, needs to happen in another file. So we're going to send this data, not to insert.php, obviously, but to update.php. We're almost done, and then we'll take a break. So that's going to point to update.php. All of our form values are going to go to update.php. Currently, update.php won't be found because it doesn't exist. We need to create the update.php page. Yeah. Why are we sending it to the same? It's actually really bad practice to send your form data back to the same page that the form is on, because you have to require so much extra logic now, right? So you need an if condition to check if the page was submitted, so that you can process that form data on that page, right? And then you still have your form that you need to deal with underneath, which you would need an else statement or something to hide it, if that is the way you're doing it. It's much better to display your form and then have another page deal with your data, right? The convenience of this too is that we can submit to update.php, and we can stop people from doing, it's called non-idempotent reactions, which is where they hit refresh like 16 times and create 16 records, because the page automatically posts to itself over and over again and runs through all of our create script all over again. We don't want that to happen. So the way we avoid that is we send it to update.php, and we're going to learn this today. We're going to redirect from update.php. So once we've made our changes, we're leaving that page. The user gets taken somewhere else. They can hit refresh to their heart's content, and nothing will happen. It won't create any extra records. So in your examples, right-click on examples, choose new file, and create a page called update.php. And I usually occasionally have a PHP developer in my program. Has anybody developed in PHP before? Yeah, cool. So one thing you'll notice that I'm not doing is validating. Not validating our data, not sanitizing, not normalizing. We will be validating, normalizing, and sanitizing in a future class. Right now, it's much easier to understand this stuff when you don't start injecting extra strategies in. Just the basics. You wouldn't normally, actually you never would insert data into your database raw. You never trust the user. You always make sure that that data is sanitized before you stick it in the database, okay? But for now, just suffice to say we're doing it raw, being raw. All right, create some PHP tags. This is in your update.php file. Once we're done this, we'll take a break for 10 minutes. Actually, let's do 15 so you have time to get somewhere. All right, connection, right? MySQLi, connect. This should just feel so, what's the word? Familiar. Localhost, root, null. Lesson 3, just because that's where our database is located. And we can var dump our post, because we'll look at the data from it. All right. Once you've done that, feel free to go to your browser, fill out the form, and click submit. And if everything is working, you should just see the post values. If you have an error with your connection, check your connection details. Make sure that you've done localhost :889 if you're on a Mac, and if you're not in your regular Windows machine, make sure that you've got null as your password and that kind of thing. I'm going to Alt Tab over, just refresh this page. Not that it's going to make a difference. A baby was born in India, so we'll add 1. Click Create. There we go. There's our updated value, our existing values. Everything carries over. Pretty much the exact same thing we did in insert.php. Not any different so far. let's go ahead and write our SQL first. 2 babies were born. Actually, by now, many more babies were born. Let's write our SQL as a separated thing. In the notes, I do an inline SQL statement. It's usually better practice to write your SQL outside and then pass your SQL. That way, if your SQL changes, you can quickly update it. Or if you need to use the SQL statement again later on, you have it. You don't need to rewrite it, right? It is, and it's a little cleaner too. It actually produces a little cleaner result set. So we're going to use an update. Have you guys done update in your relational database class? Have you updated a row? Yeah? All right. I mean, it's 5-1, Lindsay, so. Update countries, right? Set. So update countries, set. The next pieces of value that we're looking at is the column we want to update and the value we want to update it with. This is one complaint I have with SQL, is that it doesn't mimic insert. It's like a completely different statement. Like it's not even close to being like insert at all. Whereas when you start working with Mongo, every command feels the same. So it makes it a little easier to remember. This one is name equals, and then whatever the name is. Now, the way I find this the easiest to write so I don't screw it up, I know that name has to equal a string, so I put my single quotes in so that I know there's a string there, right? That way, when I go to add the actual data from post in here, it's not contaminated in any way. It's not difficult to see that that was a string. I'm going to put my cursor, for some reason I only got one quote. I'm going to put a comma after that. Each column value pair is separated by a column. It's like a list, right? It's a list of assignments. So description equals, again, need quotes because it'll be a string. And then population won't need quotes because it's an integer. Many of you submitted your lab last week using population in quotes, and it took it. Where it goofed up, though, is when I tried to assign the decimal place. It truncated the decimal place for some reason. We had product name and price, and it kept truncating off the decimal place. All right, so name, curly braces, right? Actually, just go ahead and put the curly braces in each one of these and makes your life a little easier. A little bit, not much. There we go. Let's do some multi-cursor love, right? Put your cursor between the first set of curly braces, hold your Alt key, click between the second set of curly braces, hold your Alt key, click between the third set of curly braces. Should be flashing in 3 locations. Why am I doing this? Because I'm literally going to write $_post bracket, quotation, bracket in 3 different spots. I mean, why make my life difficult for no reason? Bam, 3 times faster. Look at that efficiency. Now I can just, why don't I show you how to copy and paste in 3 locations all at once? This is a perfect prime example of this. Double click on name. Okay? On just the name that's there. Hold Alt, double click on description. Keep holding Alt, double click on population. You should have 3 blinking cursors. This is probably the sexiest thing of multi-cursors. Hit Control C so you copy those 3 to your clipboard. Okay? Still following? Put your cursor between the quote characters and square brackets. Hold Alt, put another cursor there. Keep holding Alt, put another cursor there. Wind up. Control B. That's sexy. Copy from 3 locations, paste to 3 separated locations. That's probably one of the most badass things about an editor like this. It's even more impressive when you have like 20 things. It's way more impressive. So now, if I was to execute this update command, does anybody want to take a guess of what would happen? What would happen if I ran this update command right now? Oh no, something will happen. Something very bad will happen. That's exactly it. It will update every row in our database with just the change in India, which means you'll blow away everything else. So we can set up MySQL to prevent that. There's actually setups that we can do on the MySQL database to stop very destructive operations like that from happening, where this will only ever be allowed to affect a subset of rows, providing you provided a clause. And I think by default, it's set up like that. I don't want to test it, but it should be by default. Updates like that and delete is like that. Delete's even worse. What's that? That's what it is, safe mode. If you have safe mode on, it should prevent this operation from even occurring. But if it's off, or you're using MariaDB for whatever reason, then yeah, you're screwed. So what do we need to add to this to stop that from being an issue? Comment it out. Just comment it out. That's it. We're done. That's the way you solve that problem. No, it isn't. We need a where clause, right? The where clause refines that operation to happening only to a specific data type, right? To whatever clause we provide. So we're going to add that. So go ahead and put your cursor at the end of that curly brace between this quote. Hit enter so we're on this line. You can write this all in one line if you really like to torment yourself. Where ID is equal to blah, blah, blah. And of course, get over there. $_post ID. So this will only happen where this column is equal to this ID. It would happen in every single row in your database where that ID column is equal to that ID. So that's an important thing to understand. So if you had multiple IDs that were the same, they'll all be affected, right? So you want to make sure that whatever you're doing, if it's a unique thing, then it's only happening to your primary key. Now, I'm not sure if this was explained to you, but your primary keys have to be unique. They have to be. It's just the way primary keys work, hence the word primary. So we've made the ID column in our database the primary, which means all of those have to be unique. MySQL will stop you from entering in two rows with the same ID. You can't. It'll just blow up and tell you this ID already exists. So it's very important to have a primary key on your database to avoid, screwing up your database. Go ahead and save that. Right now, are we actually doing anything to MySQL database yet? Nope, we are not. This is just a string. This is no different than writing a sentence, right? Hello world, no difference. It just looks different, but it's not. It's just a string. What do we need to do to actually execute the string? Oh, Lindsay's on it. Let's go to res. We'll store that in a variable. MySQLi underscore query. What's the first argument, Lindsay? Yep, the connection. And then the SQL. There you go. So this will take our connection and pass it to query. Query will then take the SQL that we just wrote here and fire it off to the connection. This works kind of like eval. Now, I asked Thursday if they've ever heard of the word eval or worked with eval, and everybody said no. Has anybody in this class ever used eval or know anything about eval? Sometimes you might heard it referenced as evil eval. Here's how eval works. Eval is available in almost every programming language I've ever encountered. Basically, I can take a string that you've written commands in, right? So what's a good command that you guys might know? Well, like for example, echo, right? I can say echo hello world. And I can take that string and I can pass it to eval, and eval will evaluate, so it evaluates it using the parser and will execute whatever the code is in that string. So the reason why people say eval is bad is because if you're executing data that a user gave you, you're now giving them open permission to run whatever code they want because you're just evaluating it, right? That's kind of what MySQL is doing. We're giving it a string of commands and it's just evaluating it. See why we kind of want to sanitize these at some point? Because when the user types in dump database, right, and we dump the database because we're just evaling whatever we get, you can see where there's a problem. So yeah, that's basically what's happening. This is just a string, no different than hello world. My SQL query is evaluating that basically. All right, we still need our kind of crappy, shitty error handling, but we'll use it anyways. $res, right? So when my SQL query executes, if it did it successfully, res will become true. If it screwed up, res will become false. Because MySQL is kind of crappy this way, we don't actually get a blow up error inside PHP. PHP just moves on, doesn't care. If something bad happened in MySQL, that's a MySQL problem. The thing is, though, is we have to actually ask MySQL, did you work? No? Okay, cool. What was the error, right? So it's like this kind of like, you're only going to tell me what I absolutely specifically ask you. So first we're going to echo the country was updated, dated successfully, right? Then we're going to have a nice little else statement. And we're going to echo there was an error updating the row. And because string interpolation will not parse function calls, we have to actually concatenate. We could store the results in a variable and then add it in, but it's just easier just to concatenate. And there we go. So MySQLi error will actually reach out to the database and say, hey, that last thing I just ran, was there any errors? And MySQL will return back either the error message itself or null, right? But the idea is that if res is false, there is definitely an error. Something went wrong. Once you've done that, go ahead, Alt-Tab to your browser, and just hit Control-R because your update is still in there. And it will ask you to confirm that you want to post that data again. Go ahead and click Continue and let it post back to the page. I'll do that in 1 second, just to see people still typing, so just give them a second to finish up. All right, am I good to move? Anybody still typing? No? Alrighty, I believe you. Alt-Tab, Control-R, Continue. Boom. Undefined index ID. Yep. Do you want to know why we have an undefined index ID? Let's go take a look at what we've got. Look at our post, right? Let's trace this back. Look at our SQL query. Post name, post description, post population, post ID. Does that look right? Go back to the browser. Look at post. What's it missing? ID. Why is it missing the ID? Is it in a query string at the top? It's not, right? There's no query string. How can we make sure that the form gets the ID? What do we need to do? I'll help you out. What the data that we need to change, the syntax we need to change is not in update.php. It's in edit.php. We need to add something to the form. Yeah, we could add like a get parameter here, but I mean, we're already creating this post object. Why don't we just create another input? So we'll create an input, but its type, maybe you guys haven't worked with this type, is hidden. It means it won't actually render in the browser. The whole field is missing. Like you don't see it. But when we post this, whatever value is sitting in that hidden field will actually travel with the rest of the post. Let's give it a value. And its value, I mean, let's use this wonderful inline statement here, $row ID. requires the ID because we need to know specifically which row it is that you want to change. When we come to edit, we're using the query parameter in order to fetch the correct row's data. But when we submit to update, we really don't want to mix get and post. There's no real reason to do that. It's better for us to avoid doing that. Because we are already posting data, it makes more sense that if we need to pass the ID, that we would just add it to this block, right? As opposed to adding it to the update.php URL. The only other thing we need, I have type hidden, I have the attribute value. What am I missing? What attribute am I missing? Exactly, we're missing name. And what are we going to call it? Makes perfect sense to me. ID. When the user hits this page, they won't see this field. However, super important to note, hidden fields are not secure fields. Okay? Meaning that if the user wants to see the content of this field, they simply have to inspect the page or view the page source code, and they can see it. Nothing you put on this page is secure. It's very important to remember. Don't put passwords on the page in the background. Don't put secure API keys or any sensitive information in the background because it is viewable. A hacker can go find it. Even just a basic HTML student could go find it. So you need to be careful about that. All right, we've got our ID. I'm going to Alt-Tab back to the browser. I'm going to need to go back to edit.php, but I'm going to go all the way back to table. And then I'm going to choose one of these links. Let's go to Greenland. I'm going to click edit. Looks like I have a stray character just floating around there. And Greenland had a population boost. There's now 67 people there. I mean, what else can you do in Greenland? And then I'm going to click create. Yay! The country was updated successfully. And you'll also notice that our post object has an ID column in it now. Congratulations, we earned ourselves a break. Yeah, I can come around and do error handling. Okay, cool. So everybody from what I've seen has country was updated successfully, or is at the point now where we have updated successfully. What's your question? And is it going to be long? What is it? Error, but you don't know why. I'm called undefined function. Left click. Reduce one of those R's. Get rid of one of those R's. I'm usually pretty fast at answering issues. Just to keep in mind, though, we only have a 3-hour class, and we're at 7. And we're done at 8. So when the errors kind of pile up like that, and we've got them where it takes almost an hour to resolve the errors, we're going to have to start pushing those to the end of class and resolve them at the end of the class. I realize that kind of sucks because you get kind of stuck in a spot, but you're just going to have to kind of deal with it till the end of class, and then I can help you get caught up. Just because it slows everything down way too much. All right, where are we actually? We did update. We need to do delete. Do. I also recommend going through these notes because we're going to have to glaze over a huge chunk of this. So we've updated our row. All of our row is updated. That's awesome. We also want to delete the existing row that's in the MySQL database. The good news is the delete function, the delete operation is just a process. There's no form involved in this one because all we're doing is actually deleting. So it's literally click the link and the row gets deleted, right? Now, I don't know if I'm going to be. How many want to know how to? How do I want to work this? No, we're just going to do it. Right click on examples. Yeah, I've made an executive decision. Right click on examples, click new file, type in delete.php. That's going to create a brand new file for us. Now, here's the good news. Insert.php, update.php if you noticed, or maybe you didn't notice, I'm going to click this split window and show you something really awesome. Control B, update.php. Control P, insert.php. My God, these things look very close to each other. Look at that. They're almost identical except for what's the only difference in each file? Haha, Lindsay's on the ball here. Only the SQL is different in each of these files. Otherwise, the code is exactly the same. There's really no difference between these two code blocks. That being said, we're still going to write out the code. Sorry. You can copy and paste and definitely jump ahead. I'm totally open to that. In fact, I encourage it. Anytime you feel like you're beyond what we're doing, start challenging yourself by modifying your code. Delete.php. There we go. Cool. All right, step 1. Now it should be easy, right? What's the first thing we need in a PHP file? That's right. We need the PHP tags. Without the PHP tags, we've got nothing. All right. What's the next thing we need? We're working with the database, so we need a what? That's right. Thank you. It's Emily, right? Yeah. We need a connection. MySQLi, connect. Argument 1. That's right. The host. Argument 2. Yep. Argument 3. Waha. And then the database. Sometimes I say database, sometimes I say database. Just varies depending on context. I don't know. It's probably neither. It's probably database. Database. All right. We're going to create a SQL string because, why not? And the SQL for this, could not be simpler. How did I manage to achieve that in my notes? I, for some reason, have a delete.php file with no SQL in it. Wow. Need to drink less on the weekend, too. Delete from countries. I know this stuff backwards and forwards. Where ID equals. Where am I getting my ID from? Not post. That's right. We're getting it from get. Stupid VS Code. Stop shoving things to the right. There we go. So delete from countries. That's the SQL command where ID equals a value. And again, we're using string interpolation, right? Or string templates, sorry. $_ get ID, and we wrap that in the curly braces. None of that actually gets to the browser. The browser doesn't see any of it except for the value that gets returned from it. That's the only thing it sees, right? All right, everything else is literally the same as it is in all the other files. $res equals MySQLi query $connection and the SQL. That's going to return a Boolean value based on whether or not it's successfully queried the database or not. So we're going to check that if $res echo the country was deleted. What is wrong with me? I wrote the country was deleted successfully. Deleted successfully. Else, we done failed. Echo, there was an error deleting the record. Space, dot, MySQLi, error, $con. There we go. Take out the new line characters. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines in total. In fact, I could even show you shorthand to reduce that by about 3 lines. What is this going to do? It's going to go to the MySQL database. It's going to find the row country, right? The country row that has the ID of whatever this value is, right? And that value is coming from our table.php when we click, right? Because that's where the IDs get put. And then it's going to go find that row, and it's going to remove it if it finds it. If it doesn't find it, it's not going to do anything, right? It's not going to delete anything at all. If you have safe mode turned on, you don't have to worry about the where statement, right? If you screwed up the where statement, you're still not going to wind up deleting all your countries, right? Because safe mode should protect you. If you don't, then yeah, you're likely going to delete everything. Incidentally, the proper way, if you wanted to remove everything from your database table, is called truncate. Truncate table of countries will delete everything from your database and reset your ID integer as well to 1. Just a handy hint. Or drop. Drop works, but that's on the database, and that means the whole thing's going. All right. Cool. Any questions about any of that? Let's go execute it and see if we can delete some rows. Jump over here. Obviously, table makes the most amount of sense, so we'll just navigate directly to table. I got too many Canadas. Let's delete one of the Canadas. Country was deleted successfully, and hopefully you have the same thing. Did you say no? All right, you're going to have to wait. Because I want to talk about something. We have an issue that we need to deal with, and it has to do with how data actually works. So currently, we've been doing this process. We've been separating a view from a process. So let's take a look at our CRUD operations that we have, right? We've got a whole bunch of files. So we have our table, right? We have our form, right? We have our insert. We have edit. We have update. And we have delete. Table. Is it a view or a process? Just take a guess. It's a view. Why would you say it's a view? Yeah, because you can see it. That's exactly the reason. Because you can see it with your eyes. It's a visual thing that happens in your browser that you can visually see occurring. So table, that's a view. Form, view or process? Can we see it? That's a view. That is a view. Insert, it's a process. However, it's currently contaminated. We'll talk about that in a second. Edit, view or process? Not a process, because you can see it. So it's a view. Update. What? No. Process. You can't see it. Well, you can. You can see the error message, but again, it's contaminated. Delete, process. We have 3 views, 3 processes. But our processes are a bit confusing because they're actually outputting something to the screen. We don't want them to. We want them to only process. And then when they're done, they should send you off to a view to tell you that your thing has executed successfully or you had an error. There's a few reasons why we want this to happen, and it has to do with some extremely confusing words called idempotent and non-idempotent. Has anybody in this room heard of either one of those terms? Here's how that works. 2 times 1 equals 2. This is an idempotent statement. The reason why it's idempotent is because the result will never change no matter how many times I execute this statement. I can do it 10,000 times and the result will always be the same, right? Form creates a new record, right? Every time I execute it, does the result change? It does, because it will create another record. And every time I do it, it's going to keep creating a record. So if I refresh this statement 6,000 times, it will create 6,000 brand new records, all containing the same information. This, sorry, not form, insert, is non-idempotent. and is very dangerous. Update. Let's see how well you can grab onto this. Is update idempotent or non-idempotent? Non because what? Right, but what does it change with? How many times? If I click refresh 6 times, it's idempotent because it will only ever update the value once, and it doesn't matter how many times I refresh, the thing stays the same, it never changes, right? So it is a idempotent. So it is a safe operation. What about delete? That's a confusing one for most people. Idempotent or non? Idempotent. It's idempotent because I can only delete once. I can hit delete 16,000 times, but I can only delete the record once, right? So it's idempotent. However, because our stuff is kind of mixed up, our processes have a non-idempotent, an idempotent, and an idempotent, it's better if we create a strategy to deal with this that just handles all three. So regardless of what's ever happening in these other two update processes, the fact that they're fairly safe, we're still going to treat all three as if they are idempotent or non-idempotent. We're going to basically protect ourselves. Plus, it's easier for us to implement the strategy if it's just handled in all three. Then we're not writing code specific to each one, right? So what is the strategy? Well, here's the issue. I don't want the user to accidentally click refresh on the process pages and re-invoke the action, right? Because every time because it's a page that reads line by line, it's not like Java where it's all compiled and then you interact with the application. This happens line by line every time you start that page. The page is going to go through and the process is going to happen line by line by line, which means it'll execute every time you refresh that page. Because of that issue, we need to stop the user from refreshing. Let's take a look at how our operations currently handle more Illustrator graphics. So, probably these ones, they look good. This is Tom. Hi, I'm Tom. And Tom is wanting to create a new country. So Tom accesses our form. He's making a GET request to our form. Anytime you click a link, anytime you type a URL, it's a GET request, every single time. So Tom goes to the form, Tom fills out the form, and Tom clicks post, and his journey lands on this page and he's stuck there. If Tom refreshes this page, he will perform the create action, the insert action, again and again and again, every single time he refreshes that page. Just creating multitudes of records. Here's Tom. Hi, I'm Tom. Tom goes and views the table, clicks on the edit button on the table, committing another GET request to the edit.php page. Yay, Tom. Good for you. Tom edits the country and then posts it to update.php. And once again, Tom is on this page, and for some reason, Tom's got a wiggly finger, and he's tapping, click, 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 clicking, and he's updating over and over again. Not a big deal, because he's not really changing any information. He's already changed it, right? Hi, I'm Tom. Now I'm going to delete something from the table. So I go to the table, I click on delete, I go immediately to the delete.php page, and again, Tom can just refresh the page over and over again and do the same operation again. These are all the life cycles of Tom's requests in our application. We have 4 different use cases, we'll call them. I will call them use cases. We want to change this use case. I want to make it so that, hi, I'm Tom, goes to the form, fills out the form, clicks submit, which posts the insert statement, and then he's automatically transferred from the insert.php page to a brand new page through a GET request to notification.php. What does this stop Tom from doing? This stops Tom from refreshing the page because he can refresh notification to his heart's content and it will make no change. So he can't accidentally recreate a user because we're moving him from the user page. We're saying, no, Tom, you can't do that stuff. Off you go to notification.php. Everything's handled. Does that make sense? We're stopping Tom from refreshing the page. That's our whole goal in the next 10 minutes. We'll see if we can get there. So we have a few pieces that we need to put into play in order to make this happen. One, we need a view. So we need another view page to send Tom to. Mostly because all of those error messages and success messages we've been putting out to the screen in our processing scripts, we want to stop. We now want to put those out in a dedicated view page. Meaning our processing pages are now going to be dedicated processing pages. No more contaminated view stuff in it. We've separated our dependencies, right? But it is going to involve a brand new superglobal that we have not used. Get and post are great because they live for one life cycle. They live from the request that we're on to the page we land on, and then that's it. They die there. That's where they end their lives. They're like shad flies. They live for one cycle. Once we're on that page, we can deal with the post stuff. We can deal with the get stuff. But once we leave that page, generally that stuff is gone unless we recreate the get or recreate the post and send it off, which we're not going to do. We need our data to persist regardless of if Tom makes it to the insert.php page and gets navigated, or if Tom goes to a different page and then goes to our notification page. We want to make sure that our messages stay with Tom all the way through his journey. So I can't use get and I can't use post because they only live with one life cycle. I need to use something that persists for the life of the application. So that's until he either closes the browser or, here's your key word, I destroy the session. What superglobal do I want to use? Session, exactly. So we are actually going to use sessions. However, get gets set by the URL. Easy enough. Hopefully you started to grasp that concept that the query parameter is what sets get. Post gets set by the form, right? So when we submit the form, all the names and the values get created into the post. Because session is something that we need to manipulate, we have two steps. We have to resume the session. This is a weird word. We have to basically take the session that's in progress and open it so that we can actually access the superglobal. Once we've done that, we can access the superglobal and add a value to it. Cool, eh? Yeah, whatever. Let's create, first we're going to create the notification page just so it exists. So right-click on examples.php, type in notification, watch your spelling, .php. If you don't want to write notification, write notify. Or if you don't want to write that, just write note. It really doesn't matter. Wasn't expecting that. Now in this page, we're going to write our PHP block. Awesome. We have our PHP block. Now, I don't want to do things in kind of reverse order. I don't have a notification yet. I want to create a notification and then see what it looks like on this page. Our notification passing process is going to happen in the process page, right? So that's either insert, delete, or update. Let's open up insert.php. And everything we're going to do is going to happen in this very crappy error handling we're doing down here. Let's put some distance between response and the if condition. And we'll create a comment. Resume our session. So this is going to, it's called session start, which is misleading. When you actually access a web page on the internet, you are assigned a session by your browser. It immediately exists. That's intentional because each user, there has to be some way for the browser to know what information you're interacting with versus another user. So every person on the internet gets their own session. There's like this massive session key you get. That's how have you ever heard of session hijacking? means I can hijack Lindsay's session and access her Amazon cart and now start pretending I'm her, doing orders and everything else with her credit information and whatever by hijacking your session. Anyways, session hijacking, very, very dangerous thing. However, that's kind of what we're doing. We're hijacking our own session. We need to access it because we want to add some values into that session. So we're going to resume our session. First, I'm going to write session _ start. That starts the session. A couple of caveats with this. You can only call this once per page. You can't call it more than once per page. The other caveat, you cannot output, so no echoes, before it. If you call an echo before it, session start will blow up and tell you that headers were already sent. Has to do with the fact that the second you send an echo out, you've completed your your response, and now session can't operate. Session needs to operate before the response has been sent to the page. So we have to call session start before we do any echoes, right? However, we're going to get rid of the echoes because we don't want them. So what we're going to do, I'm going to double click this echo so it's highlighted, and I'm going to access the session super global. They sound more powerful than what they really are. And I'm going to give it a key, and my key is going to be called notification or note or ed or whatever you want to call it. And what's going to happen is the new country was created successfully. If that occurs, that value is going to get stored in session notification. This word, notification, so important you understand that I just made it up, right? You can literally call it whatever you want. Doesn't matter. It's just a made-up key. When I assign a value into it, it instantiates and becomes an existing thing, right? Yeah, what's it?
So you said no echoes before, but we have an echo on line 14. Is that?
Oh, yeah. That's a problem.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's get rid of the echo on line 14. Comment it out, whatever you need to do. var dumps are okay. Echoes are not. You can var dump. I'm not sure why you can var dump, but you can var dump, even with sessions. So now that I've done that, I have one more change. There's an echo on line 25 that we've got where we're actually taking the error and putting it into there. Same thing, $_session, notification equals, there was an error creating the country, MySQL line error, blah, blah, blah. Now what will happen is when we create our country, these two values will get saved. However, we're still stalled on this page. We haven't shifted from this page yet. We're going to do that after the if condition. And we're going to get rid of that. Do this after the if condition. We're going to send a header to our response telling it to relocate. When this page parses, we haven't committed the response headers yet. They're still being built. Okay? And what's interesting, if you tell the headers to locate or give a different location, the headers will go through, hit that line, and then relocate themselves to a different page entirely. The way we do that is we call the header function. So we're going to redirect, that's the term, redirect to the notification.php page. That's what we're going to do. And we do that by calling header. And header takes a string. And the string is formatted in a very specific way because it has to be formatted like an HTML header, which you won't know much about now, but you will if you stay in this career and start working more with web-related things. So we type in location, and then we give the address, notification.php. So what location will do when it gets interpreted by the browser with the response header is it basically relocates. Now there's an issue here. It will relocate, however, the page will continue to process. This is kind of a bizarre thing inside PHP, and I've actually attempted to see if I can hijack it because it's kind of neat. It creates almost two threads. Have you guys heard of multi-threading? So multi-threading is when I have a program running on one thread. Most programs run on one thread. So that's your processor, right? So one of your processors, that's an oversimplification, but we'll pretend it's one of your processors. So you have like 4. Most people have 4. So I've got 4 processors. One of my processors is currently processing my application. When PHP goes to relocate, this page stays on a process. Another process opens up, literally parallel to this process, and starts executing notification.php. Both of these are executing till this one dies and kills out. And then this one continues. So it's like a multi-threaded operation, which is super weird because it only seems to happen with header. There are ways to multi-thread your PHP applications, but that's obviously way above the scope of this class. So we need to stop that because right now, this operation is totally fine. I don't care if it does this. This is okay because it will exit the second it hits here. But I want you to get into the habit of killing it after you call header so that you don't wind up with your page continuing to process afterwards. So right after header, you can choose. It's totally your flavor. Either exit or die. Your choice. Every one of them is going to be die. I just know. Everybody chooses die. Die is just an alias for exit. This will stop the page from processing. Super important to understand, especially when we start talking about validation, because if you validate a user's inputs, and then you're like, no, that's wrong, and you redirect them back to the form to go correct it, but you forgot to exit, you're still going to take their inputs and start shoving them in the database and doing everything that the page does. You need to exit to stop that operation from occurring. All right, so this will actually take us to the notification.php page. Let's see if that works. Alt-tab out to your browser. Come over here. We have to actually create, so go to form.php so you can create a new country. Give the country a name. I'm going to do Iceland. Country description. Not as cold. What? Sure, that works. Full of sheep. Country population. I imagine there's not that many people. 300,000. 600,000 if you include the sheep. You ever seen that SNL sketch with Christopher Walken's doing the census, and he starts naming off the people in his house, and he's got like a few plants and some chocolate bars, and he tells them about them, saying that those are like people in his house. It's pretty funny. You should watch it. All right, let's go ahead and click create. You're not really going to see much because it's just going to go to notification.php, which is a blank page. But what does this tell us? This tells us our redirect worked, right? Hopefully. It tells us our redirect worked, but we don't see any information. Let's see if we can correct that issue. Let's jump over to our IDEs. Go to notification.php. I mean, let's just echo session, right? We'll just echo it out raw. Session, notification. You can var dump session too if you wanted to. Totally your choice. I'm going to echo out session. I'm going to alt-tab back to my browser. And, undefined variable session. Why am I getting an error? What's rule number 1 of working with sessions? What's that? No echoes, yeah. No echoes before what statement? What do I need to do before I can use a session? I have to start it. I have to resume the session to be able to work with it. Type session started above it. Now that you have session start, I'll tab back to your browser and refresh. And you should see the new country was created successfully. Now you have a notification page. Here's where the problem lies. Watch this. I'm going to go to table.php. Totally different change, right? Made a brand new request. If I did this with get and post are destroyed. They're gone. They're repopulated with new stuff, right? I'm going to go back to notification directly this time. And navigate directly to notification. Country was created successfully. Why is it still there? Because session data persists till when? When does session data finally disappear? We're going to close the browser. We're going to close the browser or destroy the session. One of those two operations has to happen to get rid of it. However, we can do something else. Once the user has successfully seen their notification, they don't need it anymore, so we should clear it, so it's gone. Not only should we clear it, we should also handle one other thing. If the user navigates to notification.php, which you might say in your head, how in a million years are they going to navigate directly to this page? It's not a part of our navigation. Why would you make it a part of your navigation, right? They will bookmark stupid pages. They do that. They do it all the time. They bookmark forums, they bookmark anything, they bookmark success pages because they think they need it, so they bookmark it. So some person will bookmark this page, I guarantee you. It's probably being bookmarked now. The thing is we want to make sure that the page makes sense to the user, right? That we, as much as you want to hate them, you have to actually do things to support them. So what we're going to do is make it so that that clears. We're also going to make sure that if they navigate to the page accidentally, that we actually redirect them. So if they're not supposed to be on this page because they don't have any values or notifications to see, we're going to politely send them back to the table so that they can go see the actual data in the table. So let's handle both these steps. So step one is going to be to redirect the user, and all this is going to happen after session start. So redirect user if there is no notification. If there's no notification, there's no reason for them to be there. So how can we check if there's a notification? Well, PHP has a very handy function called empty. Empty not only checks for an empty string, it also checks if something is null, undefined, or false. So you get like 4 checks all inside one function. So we're going to say if empty, which is a function, $_session notification, like so. Then I want to redirect using header. So location, and we're just going to send them back to table.php. And as soon as I'm done my header, what do I need to do? I need to die. It's just fun to say. It's so much fun. Otherwise, and this is one of those Sean's programming tips 101. Most people will write else. You don't need else. Why do we not need an else? Exactly, it's already dead. I'm not parsing after this, so there's no reason to have an else. Incidentally, if you write an else statement in there, PHP will parse the if condition, parse the else statement, store that in memory, execute the if, which means you waste, I don't know, 2 nanoseconds, but it doesn't matter. Write efficient code. It's already dead. There's no reason to worry about it. Now we can just go ahead and echo the session. So let's write a comment above that. Output our notification. Then, this is our next step. Clear the notification. That's great. Glad there's a new version of Slack. Go away. There's a few ways we can clear the session's variables. There's a good way, and then there's a very destructive way. There's actually 2 destructive ways. You can destroy the entire session, which will cause PHP to recreate a new session with a new session ID and assign you that new session. That's extremely destructive. There's no reason to do that. You can clear the session, which will actually go through the session variables that you've created and clear all those indices and all those values all in one go. Likely not what you want to do. You probably only want to get rid of one, not all of them. Then there's this value, or this command called unset. And this is essentially PHP's forced garbage collection. It's your way to clear a variable from memory entirely, right? So you're basically reaching into the memory area and clearing the variable out of the memory area altogether. So the instantiation, the value, everything. Gone.
The value is for the key as well?
Yep. So no, it's just the It's the session and the key. If you unset session, you'll literally unset session. And then PHP will have to recreate it, and it's almost as bad as destroying it. But we're going to pass in the session, so the array, right, the variable, and then the key. And that will destroy the key and destroy the value. And essentially our whole notification message will be gone. Which, let's think about this. First time we hit notification page, do we have a notification right now? Yes, we do. When we refresh, are we still going to have a notification message? So what should happen? Go into table.php, folks. That's what's happening on the refresh. Alt-tab, hit Control-R, nothing changes. Still have our message. Wait for it. Control-R, redirect. Back to table.php. I'm a derpy user. I'm going to go to notification, derpy.php, derpy. Back to table. Yay! Solved the bookmark issue, right? Let's make sure everything still works. Let's go to form.php. Create a new country. Running out of countries. Yeah, I like Japan. That's a great place. Japan. Cherry blossom trees, right? Yeah. Country population, it's big. Like, it's not big, but there's a lot of people there. How many people are in Japan? That works. Great. New country was created successfully. Notice I'm on notification.php. Hit refresh. Boom, right back to it. Obviously, URLs, links would help on these pages. We don't have any links. So congratulations, you not only learned all 4 steps of CRUD, create, read, update, and delete, you also learned how to deal with indefinite and non-indefinite issues, basically refreshes, right, that cause destructive operations. You learned how to deal with those with our notification page. We've created our whole app. This is the app in its simplest of forms. It could not be more simpler in PHP world, which leads me to my next topic here, which is... Dun, 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 dun. Do I not have Blackboard open? Go to Blackboard. Weekly learning. Lesson 4. All right. I haven't posted the lab. I will post the lab. Just pay attention. I will post the lab like as soon as I'm done this conversation. And then it will be due not tomorrow night by midnight, but I'll give you an extra night because it's been kind of delayed posting it. So I'll give you guys an extra night. You'll have 2 nights to complete it. So lesson 4 lesson plan there. You'll see this project GitHub link. The quiz is there as well. It closes out at midnight, just to warn you. The password for the quiz is CRUD in all capital letters. So CRUD is the password for the quiz. All right? Some people are not going to understand. Project GitHub link. All right, so this is the GitHub. First thing I'm going to say, you can work in groups of 3. Can I work in groups of 4? No. Can I work in groups of 5? No. 3. Always 3. Don't even ask, okay? I hate negotiating. It's annoying. It's groups of 3. If you got one friend that feels left out, then break up into groups of 2. Right? That's the resolve. Otherwise, it's groups of 3. Objective. Guys, let me just get through this, and you guys can chat all you want. The objective. The participants will demonstrate their knowledge of basic CRUD operations. So literally the stuff we just covered in the last 2 weeks. Requirement. You must use the files provided. That is 100% a fail point. If you don't use the files provided and you submit files that are not the ones that I've given you, that aren't adding to your project, like if you want to go outside the box and do more, you can. But you must submit the files that I gave you as well. Don't give me files that are not those files. They won't be marked. You must implement, just a bit of a background on that. I've received files from lynda.com, Coursera, people doing fiber shit, stuff like that. I don't mark any of that crap, just so you guys are fully aware. You must implement each file's requirements. So if you look at the files, you'll see steps. Obviously, you can break the mold a little bit, but make sure that those requirements that are in that file are completed, and don't remove the pink, or it's pink in VS Code, whatever the color of comments are in yours. Don't remove them. Your application must be on GitHub and deployed, which we will be covering next week. Okay? And accessible from the internet. That's super important. I will show you how to create it next week. That's literally the whole class, is deploying and launching to Heroku, using Git and using Heroku. That's the whole class. We have nothing else planned. If we get it done in an hour, yippee skippy. If we don't, which I doubt we will, then hopefully we'll get it completed and everybody will know what to do. All members of the group must contribute equally. I know it's not going to happen. It never does. You always get that one guy that's like, you don't hear from him. Like week one, you sit down, you write his name on a thing, and then that's the last time you see the guy for like 2 weeks. That's why there's an extra piece to this. All people must submit an evaluation for each group member. So you can be like, yeah, Todd, fuck you. Because that's totally what that's about. So make sure you submit the evaluation. Only one group member will submit the following. This is super important. If you have 3 members of your group, I don't want 3 GitHub submissions and 3 everything, because it just creates all this crap in Blackboard. Just one group member submits the link to GitHub, which is where your repository is. And by the way, I check repository dates. So if you make changes to your repository after the due date, you get hit with late charges, right? So like late, not money, but well, link to your working online application. Super important that your Heroku link works, right? A lot of people, when we get into Heroku, this will make more sense. There's a dashboard, and then there's your URL for your actual application. So many people give me their dashboard. I don't have your login credentials. That means dick to me. I can't do anything with that. So make sure you submit the link to your app. That's super important. And a README text file with your group members, and I didn't list it in this, but I'll update it. Instructions. If your app works in some bizarre way, or you didn't, for whatever reason, create a navigation for me to navigate through your application, then you need to give me instructions on how to access the pages. The most important thing is I need to be able to perform CRUD in your app. I need to be able to create, I need to be able to see, I need to be able to update, I need to be able to delete. If I can't do those operations, you lose marks for each one of those, right? You cannot, big bold letters, you cannot. You cannot have more than 3 members in your group. You cannot copy any project, assignment, lab, lesson files. Yes, I'm going to be very verbose here. Online learning sources, online repositories like GitHub, Stack Overflow, anything like that, from a contracting source like Fiverr, which should feel obvious, but for some reason it's not. So make sure you don't do those, because it's an immediate 0, and yet it's so easy. It is so easy, because I can tell first-year students from seasoned veterans, and when I see seasoned veteran commenting, it's like capture, paste into Google, oh, there it is, and then it's done, right? So don't do that. Copy any project lab files from other students. You are all working on the same project, but I expect to see different copies of the project. They shouldn't be the same. They should all vary. Variable names should be different, strings should be different, success messages, error messages, stuff like that. And there's a lot of key tells that you would be surprised on how I can pick up whether one student copied from another. They show up all the time, and they're actually super obvious. And have another student complete your project for you. I have seen that before, even in a bullying standpoint, where a student got bullied into doing another project for another student, which is weird. If you get caught doing this, I will give you a 0 for the course, and I won't mark another thing for you. All right? So that's a super bad, like, that's it, you're done. There's a rubric here as well. Each item, these are the files that are in your rubric, project part 1.sql, which you will need to create and execute. Connect.php, which you will need to create and execute. Header, footer. Header and footer we'll talk about, because those are included files. I will show you how to make a file and include it, so you don't wind up with duplicate code everywhere. We will talk about that in week 6. Index.php, new.php. New will be your form for creating whatever it is that we're doing. We're doing superheroes, by the way. Insert.php, notification.php, edit, update, delete. Your GitHub link is worth 30 marks. So you need to make sure that your GitHub link is there. It's super important. Okay? Your online application link is worth 50 points. This is out of 434 points, so those are pretty hefty. Make sure both of those are there. I should be able to do these 4 use cases. I should be able to view all rows. I should be able to create a new row. I should be able to edit the existing row. And I should be able to delete the existing row. So if those functionalities don't work, it's 20 points apiece that you lose on it. So just keep that in mind. They have to function. They have to work. Total is 434 points. And yes, of course, I do bonuses, but bonuses require you to think outside the box. So things you can do. Don't use MySQLi. Use PDO. Go learn how to use PDO and implement it in your project, and I will definitely give you bonus marks, right? Look at things that are duplicated. Look at redundancy. I'm a big lover of students that recognize redundancy. When you find that you're typing the same code over and over again, turn that stuff into a function, right? And I reward that. When I see that type of stuff, it tells me that you're taking it one step further and not just thinking about PHP, but you're also thinking like a programmer, right? And that's what I look for. I look for the students who think like programmers. And they also register in my brain. When I hear about businesses looking for co-op students or for people to hire, those are the people I rely on right off the bat. Because when you think like a programmer, it means you can hit the ground running in a job, right? So yeah, that's basically it. Any questions about the project? No? 3 weeks from now. Yeah, it's 3 weeks from now. Yeah, tomorrow. By 5 p.m. It's due the 16th. Now that being said, even though the project is due by the 16th, I think reading week is the week after. If reading week is the week after and you find that you're just bogged down and you need an extension into reading week and you don't want to get penalized for a late, you send Sean an email by, write this down, the 13th, okay? So 3 days in advance with your current progress, right? So your GitHub link showing your current progress, and then I will extend it for 1 week, providing you need it. But I need to know your current progress. If you have no progress and you email me on the 15th, the answer will be no. So please write that down so you don't forget. Contact Sean by the 13th with some progress on my application. Okay? Can you do this project alone? 100%. Can you physically do it alone? 100%. No reason you couldn't. It's basically everything we just did. So, yeah. Cool. Awesome. All right, I'll get the lab posted up as fast as I can, and then I'll give you guys an extended day on it. Cool.